Hey everybody, I'm in Mogo now, which is further down the south coast, and I'm here in a forest that has recently been logged. There's an incredible community in this part of New South Wales who are fighting to protect some of our most wonderful forests. In fact, they're fighting to phase out native forest logging entirely, which of course we wholeheartedly support. So we're going to have a chat with Nick and Alison and Cate. So Nick Hopkins from the organisation
Friends of the Forest Mogo.
Yes, and Alison Worthington, who is a Greens councillor on Eurobodalla Council. Hooray! And Cate Frank, who's a wonderful forest activist from the organisation
Faehrmann State Forest Conservation Group.
Excellent. So we are here talking about the fact that, well, we're sitting on a tree that has been knocked over by the loggers and left here, and it's got hollows all through it. So we know the importance of hollow bearing trees for all our beautiful mammals and all our birds that need hollows to nest in and breed in and live in, and this has just been knocked over and left here. Nick, do you just want to tell us a little bit about what's happening here in terms of the forests on the south coast and why it's so important we phase out native forest logging?
Yeah, Kate, we've got something like 140 different hollow-dependent species living in our native forests, and in this compartment alone, we know there's greater gliders, we know there's yellow-bellied gliders. Forestry ecologists found them last year before the logging began. That didn't stop them logging it. There's records here of 180 different swift parrots. Swift parrots are critically endangered. Well, that didn't stop them logging either. And then in May this year, while the logging was going ahead, there was 2 different gang cockatoos spotted. Gangs are now also endangered. Well, that didn't stop them logging it either. So obviously, they're not taking account of our threatened species. They're logging their habitat anyway.
Yeah, so we've got a state government that tries to act as though they're concerned about the environment. We've had, Matt Keane, who's now Treasurer, saying he was the greatest environment minister of all time, apparently at one point. We've got James Griffin, the new environment minister. They talk up big about saving threatened species. Like they're not. That's not happening, Alison. Like, what are the...
I'm not seeing it, Kate. And
No.
Look, we know also that there's a Natural Resources Commission report sitting there as Cabinet in confidence at the moment that won't be released. And what that tells us is that in the 3 years post bushfires, in some areas of the forestry estate, absolutely no logging should take place. And that includes parts of the Bateman's forestry estate, which we're sitting in. So this information just can't be acted upon by Forestry Corporation because it won't be released by our MPs. It's disgraceful. We're currently looking at this at Eurobodalla Shire Council. I brought a motion that we advocate to state government to end native forest logging. These trees are worth more standing. It absolutely no longer economically adds up, and yet that information isn't being received well in state parliament, and then we find that Natural Resources Commission report is also being ignored.
And Cate, you've got a petition, like you've got a petition that you have been calling on the local community, in fact people right across New South Wales, to sign because it's phasing out, calling for the government to phase out native forest logging. Is that right?
Yep, so we want to end native forest logging in New South Wales, and it's not something really new, like both WA and Victoria have done similar things, so we're actually behind and it's time New South Wales does something. And I think the bushfires is a perfect example of why this needs to happen. I was there during the bushfires, and then less than 3 months later, they're logging the forest again, the forest that we stayed to try and protect and save. And all the animals that survived the bushfires were then suffering another disaster, but not a natural disaster, a disaster done by humans, and something that can be easily fixed if we decide, the people, to change it.
It's just honestly, so we've had the bushfires, the terrible bushfires destroying so much habitat, the poor wildlife that did manage to escape, and we've heard how many billions of animals died in those fires, and the poor animals that did escape, this is their refuge, the forests are their refuge, and it's being logged. So how, you're a young person, how does that make you feel as a generation that you're going to inherit this stuff? It must just make you, I'm furious, you just must be, I don't even know the word for it.
Yeah, I guess I'm sad most of the time because I've lived in this forest my whole life. Like, I learnt to swim in the Clyde River, which runs through a lot of these state forests, and played through the bush as a kid. And then now I'm seeing it get destroyed for what? Like, it's going to wood chips, firewood, and the state government isn't even making any money out of it. So what's the actual point of doing it?
So worse, right? What is the point? What is the point? So
Yeah.
worse, Nick, in terms of Takisa, you totally hit the nail on the head. Like, why are we doing it? The government is subsidising the loggers.
Yeah, for every hectare that's been logged in the last few years, the government's, well, us, the taxpayers, lost $440. But it's not a profit-making enterprise at all. It's a loss-making enterprise, which we, the people of New South Wales, are subsidising. And the people that are actually doing the logging can't even comply with the basic rules that they need to be able to log legally. So in virtually every compartment that's been logged since the fires, breaches have occurred which have resulted in penalties applied to Forestry Corporation to the tune now of, they're racked up $250,000 worth of fines.
Oh, so they're getting fined and then begging the government. So the government is having to spend taxpayer dollars subsidising the industry, and they're getting fined for flogging the crap, I'll say it, out of our forests, like completely breach after breach.
Breach
this
after
thing,
breach.
hollow bearing trees,
Yep.
knocking them down.
Attracting the maximum possible penalty available under the legislation in all the different compartments of Mogo State forest logged since the fires.
And so I love how everybody's phones are going off, because before this live feed, we didn't do a kind of everybody turn the phone off. Alison, so Eurobodalla Council, you've got a motion before council calling for native forest to be logging to be phased out. How is that being received on Eurobodalla Council?
When this motion first came to council, Cate, councillors had presentations from 4 conservationists and 1 person against the motion, and at the time deferred the motion because they wanted more information. And so we've since had briefings from staff from Forestry Corporation and Department of Primary Industries, as well as local forest defenders, BirdLife Australia, talking about how this is a key biodiversity area for triggered by the critically endangered status of the swift parrot that migrates here in winter and comes here for spotty gum blossoms. The councillors felt that they needed more information, so they've had those briefings, and this matter will come back to our council in August at a council meeting, and we'll keep people notified of that. But it is time to continue to speak to your councillors and make sure they're aware of this. Have they been to a logged forest? Do they know what the devastation really is? Have they looked at the fines that have mounted, that are issued by the EPA, which is our state government funded, regulator on this? So we're paying the EPA, under-resourced as it is, to come and monitor the works of the state-owned Forestry Corporation. The EPA are only finding out about these breaches because of the good work of citizen scientists that come into the compartments before they're logged, come back afterwards and report all the breaches. When does this exercise that we keep throwing money at end? It's been an industry in decline actually for well over a decade. We're not able to compete with foreign markets in things like wood chips, and these forests are just worth more standing. The economic case is damning.
Thanks, Alison. Like, honestly, Greens on council. At the last local government elections, we absolutely just went crazy. What's the word I'm looking for? We smashed it.
Smashed ceilings.
We smashed it at the last local government election, and we've got really fantastic councillors like Alison on our councils right up and down the South Coast now. And I'm going to do a blatant election pitch. As you know, we're coming into a state election come March. Honestly, we need to get commitments from all parties to stop forest logging. I don't think anybody thinks this is a good idea now. It's horrendous vested interests. The logging industry is absolutely out of control, sucking up taxpayers' dollars that should be spent elsewhere. Hey, what about, actually putting some of these forests into, of course, the national park estate, and let's make this area this wonderful kind of tourism draw card. And one thing you were just talking about, Nick, before was the mountain bike trails in terms of recreation that need these state forests, for that purpose, as opposed to logging them like this.
Well, we're pouring $8 million into this particular area. to develop a world-class facility. Who in their right mind is going to come and mountain bike through a logged forest? I mean, it just beggars belief.
Yeah.
It's totally sabotaging that economic, that ecotourism potential that these forests can provide us.
You should see it. Honestly, there's just fallen timber everywhere. It's a complete disaster zone, bushfire hazard, bushfire risk. Honestly, there's so many reasons why this industry, in terms of native forest logging, needs to be phased out. There's plenty of plantations.
Yep.
We can get our timber that way. Come on, enough
Yep.
is enough.
Let's complete
We are,
the transition
That's right.
to 100% plantation-based forestry.
yeah, it's got to happen. It's got to happen.
It's so
we
close.
just need to do it sooner rather than later for our beautiful threatened species that are literally on the brink after the bushfires. So good on you. I just want to say, honestly, people like this who go out into the forest every single day, our eyes and ears for all of us who care so much about nature, who really understand and want these forests protected. You are just wonderful. Thank you for everything you do, and you know, you have a lot of people who are with you on this. So, yay! Woo, good on you, forest campaigners. We love you. Thank you for tuning in.